I often see a lot of young drummers say that they really want to make like a DCI line or WGI. The way that they think to go about practicing that is to practice the snare breaks or like the chop exercises or the shopping sprees, etc. Don't get me wrong, those are great to work on, but it's not going to get you on the line. It doesn't matter how fast you can play your flam fives or rolls or whatever. What matters is how consistently you can play them. So I often see a lot of people who will like work on the chop exercises right here. But if you want to make the drum line, what you should focus on are the technique exercises. For example, the link on the top of the screen has 89 different technique exercises to work on your diddle timing, dynamic roll variations, isolated double stops, which makes it so you can see whether or not your hands are playing evenly together, stick control, etc. The next thing that to focus on, grid variations. If you focus on diddle, flam, cheese, flam drag, and flam 5 on one, that is going to set you apart. 80% of your time should be focusing on technique and grid variations. Ideally, 5 to 10% focus on the chop stuff. That's how you make the line, playing consistently over time, not just playing fast and inconsistently. If you look at studies on elite athletes like Olympians, they spend only a couple of hours a day of doing very focused practice, intense. They don't sit there and practice like 10 hours a day. One has to do with injuries and repetitive stress, etc. But physically practicing, they are very focused on what they do, and then they take breaks. One of the things that they will do to supplement that is they will actually do something called mental imagery from different scholars from sports psychology and expertise skill acquisition researchers. They found that people who physically practiced versus people who just mentally like visualize themselves as like intensely as possible, like want to feel the ball, you want to feel the weight of it, you want to be able to like imagine every motion of your arms, etc. when doing it. For most mental imagery studies, it's about 80% of effective. So if you want to not get those repetitive stress injuries, but you want to still practice, you can still practice and it'll be about 80% as effective. One of the things I used to do in school, be sitting there in class and drumming in my head so I could get better because I didn't need to pay attention to what the teacher was saying for the people who were not prepared for their class, etc. There's a lot of people who think it all comes down to like innate ability, but it's wrong. And I say that confidently. I'm actually a scholar in music education. I've taught thousands of students, every grade, kindergarten through doctoral student. It's all about the effort. It took me months to be able to play my first flam drag. Literally months just to be able to get it, even like that poorly. After 50 hours of practicing in any domain, your brain develops this thing called automaticity. So it makes it so that things become more natural. And at that point, it's indistinguishable between people who have innate ability and people who actually have to work for it. So the people who think that it's all about, well, you were born that way. It's like, no. Let me emphasize again, I was the worst percussionist in the school my freshman year, and then I was first chair of every ensemble my sophomore year. It's because I practiced several hours a day. That's it. And I've seen that with every student I've worked with. Honestly, that's a mistake among many people. When they first start, they're just trying to play super fast. No matter how many times I'd tell students, like, you gotta slow it down, they'd always be like, but that doesn't work. How do you get faster playing slow? It's a paradox. I know, it's weird. Since you mentioned paradiddles, there's the paradiddle zoom zoom. So if you play through this and you start at 34, let's say, you might be looking at me going, how is this gonna help with my paradiddles? Just trust the process. The only reason why I believe that it would work is because I literally got lessons from world champion like snare drummer Jeff Queen, the tenor soloist from Blast, Vern Johnson, the people who taught them, Glenn Crosby, who's an OG who's taught so many world championship groups. I got lessons from those people, and those people who have been able to consistently demonstrate high quality performing and teaching over an extended period of time kept telling me the same things. I was like, let's just try it. Let's just see if this helps. And guess what? It did. So like you're saying, yeah, if you just sit here and practice this at like very fast tempi, BPMs, tempi is plural for tempo, you're not going to get better in the long run. You got to slow it down. It works. In the timestamps, start at 40 and don't worry about playing it faster than that. Go up one click at a time. You'll eventually get there. That's what I did. That's what like the greats do that I've been fortunate enough to be able to study with, etc. Like, there's no shame in practicing slow. It's what everybody has to do to eventually refine their technique and get good at least to get from like the intermediate to the advanced. Everybody's got to do it. One of the ways that you can actually improve your playing is improving your focus, especially when you're in the lot. There's so many things going on, people that you might recognize or things happening in the background background, like Godzilla fighting Mothra, etc. What you need to try and do is focus on something off in the distance, whether it's like a tree or like a truck parked, and only let your mind think about your playing. Little things can actually add up. Like I was in a lot one time, one of their snare players just like kept messing up. And so he's like, hey, can you spit out your gum in the trash can over there? After he spit out the gum, he was able to play consistently. Why? One less thing for his brain to focus on. So you can actually train this with like meditation or doing something we would call the set game, where we'd have like two people who would face each other and they'd go to set. And so their goal was to not break set, to not smile, to not laugh, etc. So everybody else on the drum line would like kind of stand around them, say goofy things, or like move around and like try and distract them. This helps prepare you for when you are in the lot or you are performing. So that way when distractions are going on around you, you can just sit and focus, or stand and focus, or march and focus on the thing that you need to do. Anything the students would do, I would also do. So like if we were doing conditioning, always do the cardio, and I made the staff do it as well. So like I was always the caption head of the drum lines that I taught on. All of the staff also worked hard with the students. If students were standing, I was standing. I would not sit there and like be in the shade, in a lounge chair, sipping some lemonade. Like, no, if you guys are working, I'm working. I will not sit down. My own philosophy. Did not try and separate myself from the students that I worked with. And I highly recommend that for any other instructors. There was a drum line that I was a part of where the instructor set up the snare line so that we were all standing in the sun and they were standing in the shade. I was the opposite of that. And so I would have like the drum line, hey, arrange yourself so that you are all protected in the shade and I will stand in the sun. And I'd always wear like a fisherman's cap or whatever to like protect myself in sunscreen. Because, you know, Arizona gets hot and melanoma is a thing. Even if you have bad instructors, you can still go, okay, I can learn something. I can learn what not to do as an educator. And that's very valuable. I say that as somebody with a doctorate in music education. As high as you can go with the education side of things. Some of the best lessons that I learned was learning what not to do just by seeing bad instruction. Not just like reading the research on here's what works. It's also, well, here's what didn't work. Some instructors are also, they'll give you the sheet music at rehearsal because they were just like that late with like preparation. I personally think that's a waste of time. If you give it to people in advance, then they can actually start preparing for it. So we can actually get there and start rehearsing rather than learning the music. And there's one time I was teaching high school where they collectively did not come prepared. And I was like, I literally said no to hanging out with friends and family like a week or two in advance of this so I could get the music to you as quickly as possible. And you all did not come prepared. So I'm going to go hang out with friends and family. So see ya. So I left rehearsal. Don't waste my time. Diddle timing is a great way to improve your interpretation of diddles. So it does a slurred interpretation, normal, rushed interpretation, and then a normal interpretation. It is the same thing for diddle on 2. Slurred, normal, rushed, normal, and then diddle on 3. Slurred, normal, rushed, normal, and synthesis puts them all together. Diddle on 1, diddle on 2, diddle on 3. If this exercise is too fast or too slow for you, in the timestamps of the description, you can slow this down as slow as 40 beats a minute or as fast as 200. There's also a few more variations, accent on 2, accent on 3, or no accents, and there's even a variation that is for 5 strokes instead of just isolated diddles. And those are just a couple of the thousands of free play-alongs that you can find linked at the top of the screen or in the home tab of my YouTube channel under the playlists.